If you aren't from around the west side of Michigan, you may not have heard of the tale of the Ada Witch. Around Grand Rapids, there was an author named Gary Eberly who was researching local haunted tales, and he decided to write a book called Haunted Houses of Grand Rapids in 1982. This book mostly contained local testimonies from Grand Rapids area residents about spooky occurrences and haunted tales from the area. An area's folklore is intertwined with the history of the region. And a tale that kept popping up was the Ada Witch of Ada, Michigan. The story revolves around a place that is now called Seidman Park, and it goes as follows. There was a man that lived in Ada, Michigan in the 1800s, and this man suspected his wife of having an affair. One day, he wandered to the area of Ada, Michigan, that is now Seidman Park, and it was there that he found his wife in a loving embrace with another man. The husband then disrupted their lovemaking and stabbed his wife to death before he attacked the other man, and somehow, when both of these men were fighting, they both died from the wounds that were inflicted upon each other. Per Eberly's book, ever since then, at the full moon, hunters and young couples parked in the area have seen ghostly forms reenacting the crime in the moonlight. Others have seen a mysterious woman walking alongside the road. A man named Mike Kroll, who saw her once, described her as having, quote, very thick, shoulder-length hair and a trim hourglass figure, wearing a loose-fitting dress with large, hanging sleeves, unquote. This urban legend that Eberly put into literary form for the first time in 1982 was mostly an innocent urban legend, until it took on a life of its own in 1999 when a movie called The Blair Witch Project came out. Eventually, as the tale grew, an innocent woman's grave was vandalized and sold for spare parts on eBay in the early days of the internet. So how did this happen? Well, that's what I'm going to try to answer for you in this video today. So in the 1800s, Ada, Michigan was just a little trading post near the Thornapple River. A European-American settler and fur trader named Rix Robinson built the first trading post in Ada around 1821, before being the first European-American settler to purchase land in Ada around 1833. The American Fur Company and Rix Robinson were setting up fur trading posts all along the west side of the state at this point, while the Native American Ottawa tribe was already in the area, settling along the Grand River that flowed through what would become Grand Rapids and Grand Haven and into Lake Michigan. One of Michigan's first senators, Lucius Lyon, was also purchasing land around the region at this time. The first post office in Ada was established in 1837, the year that Michigan officially became a state, and 3 years later, the subject of the Ada Witch urban legend was born. Her name was Sarah Ann Chilson. She was born in Delaware County, New York on December 29, 1840, and just 2 years later in 1842, her eventual husband, Archibald McMillan, would be born in Canada to a Scottish immigrant family. By 1846, Archibald McMillan and his family immigrated to the United States and set up shop at what was then called Cannon, Michigan, when Archibald was 4 years old. At some point between when Sarah was born and by 1860, for reasons unknown, she was taken in by the Whitney family of Michigan. Maybe something tragic happened to Sarah's family, or she was a runaway, but somehow, between the years of 1840 and 1860, she made it from New York to the sparsely populated town of Cannon, Michigan, near Grand Rapids, by the time she was 20. According to census records, the Whitney family and the McMillan family were farmers in Cannon, Michigan, so they undoubtedly knew each other. Of course, by this time, the Civil War in the United States was about to start. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in November of 1860. By April 12th of 1861, Confederate troops attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina, and the Civil War had begun. According to census records, Archibald McMillan enlisted in the Civil War on September 9th, 1861 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He would fight with the Union Army for 3 years before he mustered out on October 22nd, 1864. Within 3 years of returning from the Civil War, Archibald McMillan and Sarah Chilson married on October 2nd, 1867, and then had a son named Clarence in 1868. And then only 2 short years after Clarence was born and 3 years after Sarah and Archibald were married, Sarah passed away on November 25th, 1870 of typhoid fever, a little over a month away from her 30th birthday. Archibald would remarry and have 3 more children. He'd live a long life and eventually find work at Jackson Prison in Jackson, Michigan, before passing away in 1930 at the age of 88. Seems like a fairly sad and tragic tale, right? A woman who died from typhoid fever a little over a month from her 30th birthday after recently being married and having a kid. Not to mention, it seems she also lost her whole family at a young age. Maybe we should just let this poor lady's soul rest in her grave for the rest of eternity and not desecrate her tombstone? Psh, nah, that's no fun. Why would we let her rest when she could be a witch? As I previously mentioned, the first time the Ada Witch appeared in literary form was in Gary Eberle's book, Haunted Houses of Grand Rapids in 1982. Eberle spoke to several locals who heard about the Ada Witch or had experiences themselves near modern-day Seidman Park in Ada, Michigan. The odd thing about the tale of the Ada Witch, though, is that most people who say they have seen her will say that she runs away into the night when approached. And this is more of a characteristic of a ghost instead of a witch, but it's possible that the dress she was wearing and her thick flowing locks gave the appearance of a witch to many. Now at this point in 1982, there was no human name to the Ada Witch. It was just an urban legend for people around the area. But my question is, how did Sarah Ann McMillan get looped into all this? Gary Eberle actually did not mention Sarah McMillan's name once in his book, Haunted Houses of Grand Rapids, and neither did any of the people who saw her up to that point. So I'll be very clear, Eberle is not to blame for the unrest Sarah has experienced. But this area around Seidman Park where people have seen the witch is very close to Findlay Cemetery. The street next to Findlay Cemetery, 2 Mile Road, touches part of Seidman Park. Most that have seen the Ada Witch have reported her in the areas of 2 Mile Road, all the way to Bailey Drive, south of Seidman Park. So it stands to reason that locals picked the closest cemetery in the area, a cemetery where many people from the 1800s are buried, and they thought, yeah, the Ada Witch probably is one of the women buried in that cemetery. Some locals have even reported that they've seen a woman in a long dress wandering around the cemetery at night. Furthermore, another local folktale writer named Don Ferrant said in a 1985 Grand Rapids Press article that the nickname for this woman was Ada Annie and not Sarah McMillan. Ferrant also had a different origin story than Eberle, saying that the Ada Witch was actually a woman who died in a car accident in the 1930s. She was wearing a party dress and on her way to a party when she got in the accident, hence why she always appears in a dress. But as far as I can tell, it wasn't until a certain cultural phenomenon happened in the late 90s that anyone tried to desecrate Sarah McMillan's grave in Findlay Cemetery, and that cultural phenomenon was the Blair Witch Project in 1999. When this found footage horror film came out, a film with one of the first viral internet marketing campaigns that created a completely made-up tale and turned it into a true story, people across the United States started looking into witchy folktales from their own areas and talking about them again. Others wanted to buy their own camcorders and record their own found footage horror films, and they'd usually draw from local folktales. Ada, Michigan was no different. There's proof that the legend of the Ada Witch was alive and well in 1998, the year before the Blair Witch Project came out. Per the Grand Rapids Press, a woman named Jennifer Strauss Invinskus brought a 100-year-old lamp down from Copper Arbor, Michigan in the Upper Peninsula, lit the lamp, and told spooky stories from Michigan, including the tale of the Ada Witch at the nearby Granville Library. But sightings of the Ada Witch coincidentally become much more popular after the Blair Witch Project blew up in theaters across the country in 1999. Some say that they've heard screams around Findlay Cemetery, were touched by ghostly hands or saw apparitions, and others say they've watched the whole scene of a cuckolded man murdering his wife and her lover in Seidman Park under the pale moonlight. According to this news report that aired in 2019, a woman named Julie Wiley said she saw the witch around Bailey Drive, south of Seidman Park.
It's been 12 years for Julie Wiley.
I was driving home from work, heading down Bailey. I was coming up, crossing the hill here, and all of a sudden I see a woman, as what I thought, sitting in the middle of the street. She had a long flowing blue dress on, kind of blonde, longish hair blowing, and she was sitting there waving her arms, and the words coming out of her mouth to me looked like she was asking, help me, help me.
She called and told her boss.
And was telling the story, and he's like, oh my gosh, you just saw the Ada Witch.
In 2003, about 4 years after the Blair Witch Project was released, a paranormal investigator group from California came to Ada, Michigan to investigate the Ada Witch tale. They somehow got drawn to Sarah McMillan's grave. And this was when they assigned the tale to a completely innocent woman that died of typhoid fever, a woman who had not died in some love triangle murder plot. I guess her grave just had a lot of psychic energy around it. As more ghost hunters went to Findlay Cemetery and the area around it to inspect the Ada Witch, so did vandals and opportunists. Sarah's grave slowly got taken apart after 2003, and then people would sell those spare parts on eBay. I really have to ask though, who the hell was buying little pieces of gravestone on eBay? Are there people that just frame parts of graves and put them on display in their living room? Luckily, a local author and ghost hunter by the name of Nicole Bray came to the rescue and got to the bottom of Sarah McMillan's tale. She found that not only did Sarah McMillan not get murdered and that she died of typhoid fever, but she also figured out that there was no triple homicides in Ada, Michigan that fit the description of this tale from 1850 to 1950. This tale had no root in reality. Bray then asked Lowell Granite Company to make a new gravestone for Sarah so that vandals wouldn't pick apart her grave anymore, and this gravestone would lay in the ground so she could finally rest in peace. Does she rest in peace? Well, my recent visit to the grave proved that people are putting spare change on her gravestone, so I'm not so sure she is resting happily. Regardless, the tale of the Ada Witch is still alive and well today as locals and visitors continue reporting apparitions of a ghostly woman wandering around the area of Findlay Cemetery and Seidman Park. So here comes my final theory. What could the Ada Witch be? Well, Ada, Michigan is home to a lot of rich people, and if you look up the names of those people, then that's your business. What do rich people enjoy doing? Well, socializing with other rich people, wine tastings, golf, hunting people for sport on their private islands, and participating in swingers clubs. So my theory is that a local swingers club that is into exhibitionism are meeting in the fields around Ada, Michigan at night, cosplaying in 1800s clothing. After they do their ghastly deeds, they all walk home dressed in their 19th century garb, and if anyone sees them, they run into the woods and hide until they can safely go home. Do you have a better theory? Comment below and prove it. I can guarantee that you don't.